The Lord Christ Jesus is my shepherd. I shall not want. The Lord Christ Jesus, the Lord Christ Jesus maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. The risen Christ restoreth my soul, and leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of the resurrected Christ within me. Yea, though Benton walks through the valley of the shadow of death, this underworld, what Benton is cannot fear evil because of the resurrected, risen Christ within. And that is the rod and the staff that comfort Benton as Benton falls into calamity within this delusory realm from time to time. The most super intelligent force and power of love and creation preparest a table before Benton in the presence of this realm, also known as mine enemies, and anointest Benton's head with oil. Benton's cup runneth over. Goodness and mercy shall continue to follow Benton all the days of his death, for he dwells in the house of the Lord Christ Jesus forever, within delusion, within the illusion of time, space, location, place. Specificities, indeed. And if anybody ain't down with the Lord Christ Jesus, not Benton's problem. Benton's making his own problems out here, as we've seen on recent streams. Most recently, getting drunk in the streets of Los Angeles on stream, showing himself as a silly person, not to be taken seriously in spite of his serious manner, right? At times, most of the time. Who cares? For none of this shall amount to a hill of beans, for this is death. Life is a breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it. Board game. B-O-R-E-D, perhaps? Benton can't call it. Well, you got your live chat down there. Shout out to the live chat. Maybe there's a replay crew, maybe not. Don't know. And it's, Benton's own attachment to certain aspects of death, right? Imagine the source of life itself, that phenomenon that will never know death. And taking this death so seriously. Why so serious? And that is the recent undoing of old Benton. That's a death, right? To temporarily create through the subversion of the creative force and in an animated death warmed over fashion, to see it dance and perform, hello, my baby, hello, my darling, and then hello, my ragtime gal, and then this drama, the passion play. I guess that's probably not the proper term, but these dramas. It's funny, that's what they called it in the Jehovah's Witnesses at the assemblies, the circuit assemblies and the district assemblies. There was a drama, a play put on. And in the context of this Jehovah's Witness assembly, that was, very much looked forward to, because the rest of it was boring ass Bible talks and dissemination, mind control and authoritarianism disseminated. And Benton, in his undiagnosed fake autism, would have his notebooks in his book bag, of course, dressed in his Sunday best, making lists. I was a big list maker back in the day as a youth. So pop culture, I remember making lists of whatever music I was into at the time, maybe TV shows, ranking them. Plenty of time to think it through, And then an opportunity to maybe, at the Jehovah's Witness assembly, maybe meet another person who was actually into comic books. This was, the 80s. Not very many people were into comic books, believe it or not. It's a very much different environment now. To be seen as a person into comic books back then it's a very different animal. So when folks romanticize the 80s and the 90s, is there a framework to remember what it was like back in the so-called day? Now, as far as perfecting the path, the path is perfected. Walk the path, bozo. Hey, bozo, how about you walk that path? You can't walk no line. Oh, really? Why? Because of the foolishness and embarrassment and mockery and ridicule, if only in my own mind, of straying from the path only to return yet again to the path of progress, the path of death, right? Walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Well, where is he walking through? Where's he walking to? What's he walking away from initially? And what is he circling back to? Well, that's the remembrance, the John 14:26 remembrance, the birthright of the insertion into this realm or matrix, leaving the womb of the mother, spiritually perfected, innocent, sacrificed to Moloch, and then engaging in all sorts of foolishness and nonsense. And that's just to exist in society. That's not even the self-inflicted or the, what the individual might face based on their own personality, based on their own makeup, right? Based on their own traits and characteristics. And how strongly will the being identify with the birthright throughout the process. And make no mistake, this is Benton talking to Benton. This is Scagnetti on Scagnetti action, right? Yeah, it can be framed in a way where plausibly it's information for other people to maybe entertain themselves with, and this is entertainment. And then some may say, well, this is information, this is good game at times. It's all for Benton. Oh, that's right. The holy individual experience spiritually rears its head, lest the royal we forget. So to accept what this realm promotes and propagandizes as life, that's a breakfast cereal. And Mikey likes it. No, this is death. Make no mistake. This is death. There's no other point to this place. What other meaning or point could exist here in the context of the birthright of what I am, one with the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, filled with Holy Spirit, tilling the soil and the resurrection of the risen Christ within, having unlocked the achievement within the world of death and game of lies of true knowledge of self. Well, that's all fine and good. Those are mechanisms to what? Experience even more pain, struggle, strife, difficulty, right? And if the path were not arduous, what good would the path be? That's why the path is perfected. Let's do some movie references. What is it? No Country for Old Men. You know, what good was the rule if this is where it brought the individual? Well, what good is the path if the individual strays from the path and, you know, falls into calamity and is unable to climb back up onto the path and walk the path? The path is always there, perfected. The path is never not there. The path is where? Time, space, location, place. Inward. Inward. And then the mocking of the realm, air quotes, in dash word. Or we have INWARD. Can a person like Benton even discourse on these topics and address an audience and even be properly understood? Because inward means it's a racial slur. Meanwhile, the actual word used to be freely used, and in fact, Richard Pryor's first comedy album was called, let me remember this correctly. I think it's That Nigger Is Crazy, I believe. Dick Gregory's autobiography is Nigger, right? James Baldwin, I walk around Los Angeles, and every once in a while there's a sticker, read James Baldwin. Well, yeah, I've read enough to know that James Baldwin talked about the phenomenon of this word nigger. Well, that's now verboten, especially in my accent with this hairline and this hair. So it's been replaced by, quote, the inward. So when Benton addresses the path and begins to talk about time, space, location, place, well, look at how the realm has prepared the spiritual attack, right? Oh, you're telling me the path is nigger? What? Well, the path is to be the nigger. Who's the nigger now? It's old Benton out here where he is. And to simultaneously somehow represent the white racist establishment. And, you know, Dick Gregory said, if you can't call the stock market and find out if it's going up or down, you ain't white. White is a status. Well, the system has co-opted that and blurred the lines, and now it's, oh, well, the pale skin. Meanwhile, many to this day, different ethnicities do everything in their power to remain as pale as possible because of the status of the pale skin. And this is to seek the riches. This is to seek the death. Render unto Caesar, let the dead bury the dead style. Even at the level of one's own meat suit. See? So yes, the path. It's always accessible because it is inward. But to walk the path is to be some version of a nigger or inward, right? See how it works? And can this ever be a coincidence? Well, Benton knows the nature of coincidence. And Benton knows ask and ye shall receive. And Benton asks for spiritual attacks. Demons do your worst, and that continues. And they do their worst. And at times, the attacks of the enemy find a temporary foothold. And what is the result of the foothold? It's to temporarily fall into calamity off of the path, only to then go inward or nigger and go back to the path, return to the path that lies inward, and to be treated by this realm as a nigger. And that was one of the things James Baldwin wrote about, speaking to society, who called him a nigger. He said, well, you created the nigger society. You're the nigger, not me. And it's also James Baldwin, the author, presumably accepting that there was nothing that he could do about how society would view him and treat him. But meanwhile, the quickening spirit vibrates ever quicker and rises above the attacks. Demons do your worst. Well, they do. They do. And this is why people tune in. It's not that Benson is manipulating, although he is. Look at yesterday, manipulating to attempt to extract money in a calamitous, turbulent inner space because of events in the zeitgeist, right? Well, who cares? Are they going to do something to this dead flesh? Oh no. Well, Benton is still a little attached to this dead flesh. Again, to treat one's blessing as if it were a curse by attaching to this death, clinging to death, right? How silly. And so the calamity of intoxication, and this is what I mean by, this idea that anyone in this realm is getting away with things. Well, why am I punished immediately for 8 drinks and foolishness on live stream? Still observing the damage wrought to the physicality. And then we saw some of it with the crash outs of yesterday afternoon. So it's for Benton to what? Go inward and alchemize and work with these various aspects metaphysically. And that's a lot of what gets old Benton out of bed in the morning. It's not the acclaim. Ha! It's not the potential rewards. Oh, look, some people sent me some money. Great. Thanks. And certainly grateful. But would not gratitude be grateful either way? How is gratitude conditional? Right? To thank the audience for the donations is how's that any different than being grateful for the no donations? What's the difference? The daily bread is there. It's the path. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our bread. Yeah, that's called the inward path. Yeah, here's to be provided for within death. Here's your nigger. Enjoy it. Or serve the system of death and be able to pass oneself off for something in an inverted fashion, something a few degrees above or removed from the nigger, the inward, the perfected path that lies within, the walk of the nigger. And that's the persecution. So would it be appropriate to simultaneously engage my own lower nature and in manipulation that comes quite easily, right? To do what? To buy, ever more things to put into the dead flesh, right? And some people are putting, you know, harmful substances into the dead flesh. And the idea that some have said Christ, after being entombed, after being executed for sedition on the cross, there's this notion, well, his body never fully died, and that maybe, people went in there with frankincense and myrrh and all of these things, whatever healing oils and whatever powerful, hemp products perhaps were available, whatever they had going on back then. And, the 3 days perhaps was, lying in some state of stasis, I guess. I don't know, whatever that would be called. And then, regenerating to some extent. And I'm not claiming that. I'm talking about, this is a thought experiment. You know, um, so to in some ways bow down to entities lower than myself, to do what? Manipulate people over the internet who are seeking connection and dealing with whatever they're dealing with in their lives. Well, maybe there's something to take from them, see? And that's this world. That's what this world does. It looks at its human resources, what can be extracted. So that's Benton behaving based on the nature of this world temporarily. And what causes that? To stray from the nigger, to seek an escape out of the nigger status that comes along with walking the internal path. And it's an explanation for when the rich man supposedly came to Christ, or visited with Jesus, more correctly, and asked how to follow and what to do. He said, well, sell all your possessions and donate them to the cause and follow me, partner. Right? The guy ran away. And again, because he doesn't know who he is without all of those things. And would he not know intuitively that, well, that would be to choose to be the nigger? To choose to be the nigger. Well, Benton chose to be the nigger, in a way, when he chose to insert himself into homelessness. When he certainly could have continued to, engage in active bitch management around ex-wife number 2 and have her off working while Benton went through whatever he needed to go through, right? And then put a lot of effort into manipulating her so that she keeps working and Benton is free to loaf and deal with his problems realistically. And was still making podcasts back then in 2011, creative endeavors. I had an affordable apartment with my own private space. Had it all in a lot of ways from Benton's perspective, and it was folly and error and calamity because it was not the path of the nigger. And so that's a very good analogy for what Benton was crashing out about yesterday and freaking out about, and I was freaking out. I mean, now did it begin as a legitimate panic, and then Benton recentered himself and realized, oh well, now in this emotional state, there can be this performative aspect, and attach it to what? Money, death. Attach it to death. Attach it to, the experience of not this life, it's this death. In inverted world, how can it possibly even be called this life? What do you mean? That's a breakfast cereal and a board game. Roll the dice, or the die is cast. So the die is cast in a way, with Benton's skin and his hairline and needing to shave his head at times for various reasons. And his comical physicality. And in fact, there's a so-called illegal immigrant, one of these 5-foot tall fellas, younger fella, who's taken to laughing and mocking my body language in the streets. And I find it funny. It's interesting. He's observed my behaviors and patterns. Of course, he's completely I'm just an actual crazy person. He's the nigger. Must be walking that path at least some of the time. Now, Benton, even Benton will view, well, this person's on drugs, mentally ill, or maybe just mentally ill. Some of them got the natural high, like old Benton. Get high off the body chemicals. So it's not the perfection of the path, that's external. Again, time, space, location, place. Wait a minute, in what context? Vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Waking dreams, surrealistic unreality. A realm created via the delusion because of subversion of the creative force that never lies dormant and is always expanding, birthing, right? Desirous of usefulness and utility. Book of Job style. Have you considered my servant Job? Maybe he's the nigger. Or if he's what I am, then he is the nigger in this play. Well, he don't look like a nigger. He's blessed. He's got the most wealth. He's playing his position. Oh yeah, that nigger's playing his position. Take it all away, and then we can see the nigger. And antithesis says, ha, he'll curse you to your face. Oh, really? Or will he stay on the path? The inward path. It's right there. It's coded into the language. It's right there, and Benton never saw it until this morning. Just poof, out of nowhere, here's an epiphany. Oh yeah, inward, I-N-W-A-R-D, and in-word. Phonetically identical. Isn't that interesting? So it's actually, in some ways, a forbidden term. So inward, I-N-W-A-R-D, adjective, situated on the inside, that is within, inner, belonging to the inside, from the 9th century. Number 2, not superficially obvious, inner, not expressed, especially relating to mental or spiritual faculties as opposed to external ones. This is the path. This is a description of the path, the perfected path that lies within. It's there if you are what I am. And that's not a challenge. That's a caveat or something that must be addressed. Moving or tending toward the inside. Archaic of a voice, not directed toward the outside world, and thus quiet or indistinct. Number 5, obsolete, internal to a particular place or country, not foreign, domestic. Number 6, obsolete, secret, private, kept hidden. Number 7, obsolete, coming from one's inmost or sincerest feelings, heartfelt, earnest. Sounds like authenticity to me. And so, you know, how much of this calamity, this temporary calamity, you know, was temporarily seeking to construct something in a world of death and game of lies for oneself externally. See, that's what old Benton was doing, whether he knew it or not. You know, seeking to be viewed some type of way, seeking attachment to, you know, certain expectations. Oh, look at the nigger. He's expecting things again. That sure is one entitled nigger. Huh. Number 6, or number 8, obsolete, intimate, closely acquainted, familiar, close. Number 9, obsolete, devoted to spiritual matters, pious, devout. Oh, the nigger? The nigger is devoted to spiritual matters, pious, and devout. It's almost like the realm knows what this is. Now, some folks may say, well, they, air quotes, they have to tell you. Well, if they do, I mean, what more do you need to know by, air quotes, the N word and what that symbolizes? Right there in your face, partner. And I couldn't see it till this morning. Or Benton, whatever that is. What even is this? Mockery and ridicule, death. Performing in this realm is the performance of the nigger. Or it's to refuse to properly understand that that's what the being will be treated as if the being brings forth the blessing and the power and the supreme authority and the source of life that may very well lie within Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity style. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Sure, you're not, unless you want to be a nigger. Wages of sin may be death, but the cost of proper performance is to be met by this world of death and game of lies as the nigger. Act accordingly. Act accordingly. Let's go. Let's see. 10, obsolete of animals, tame. 11, obsolete of medicines, internal, applied through the stomach by being swallowed. And then how many people, in order to work their corporate jobs, have to swallow, metaphorically, a whole bunch of nonsense and humiliations? The nigger. And we don't mean, it probably shouldn't need to be repeated, but we don't mean black person. Meanwhile, Benton has identified himself as half black culturally for quite some time. And pretty much everybody is where I'm from. And you see certain lolcows like Wings of Redemption, and there's just people who don't understand the cultural context of the Deep South say, why is he talking like a black person? Right? Is this a wigger? No, where I come from, this is a lot of people talk this way. And so here's an example from my life. I'm in the drinking the other day. I saw my I referred to him as a drunk, but that's really not cool. But my acquaintance that I've made, the local person, I could tell, I can tell when somebody's struggling through alcoholism in the morning. So bought him a couple of beers, and had to wait until later in the day to have my beer, of course, because of the digestion, and still, going through this idea that it was, I wasn't going to get hammered. And this was not, on the scale of hammered, it wasn't that serious, but either way, um, definitely intoxicated, but that's not the point. So he also smokes tobacco, and so I will smoke a black and mild on occasion. Not, it's rare, but I can smoke at least half a black and mild, right? And no black and milds for some reason. It was only black and milds. I think maybe California might have banned black and milds now that I think about it. Not sure. That's a good question. Multiple stores. But so going into a liquor store and then realizing, well, I'm just asking questions. And there's a black fella, and he's ready. I can just tell, he's ready to go. It's a city. He's got places to be. And so I let him go in front of me, but it's, the way I did it from his perspective is, oh, well, this is a fearful white person scared of the blackness, right? But of course it's not that, because I would have I'm treating it as a human, regardless of who it was behaving the same way. And then, I'm like, oh no, I'm just asking questions. And then he leaves, and I, oh, they don't even sell black and mild. And so he heard that as he's walking out the door, and then, so we're waiting for the light to change to cross the street, and he suggests the tobacco store, not knowing I just came from the tobacco store. But because of my accent and the way I talk, this is what I mean by half black culturally, I'm able to say, however I responded was, sort of in my native tongue, right? Which seemingly all black Americans speak this language for whatever reason, even if they're from LA, regardless of where they're from in the country. Maybe not the Northeast so much, but certainly other parts of the country. And again, I can't even remember how I phrased it. It's there's no thought required to lapse or to fall into my native tongue. But it ended with good looking out, because I explained that all they have is black and milds. But again, just the phraseology of it, he realized, oh, this is a person he's not your typical white boy. And so that is a very deep Southern thing that just folks aren't aware of. Is it dying off? Sure it is, but it still exists. It's just still a real thing. And I only mention that because it's comes to mind, and I find it interesting. But inward adverb. 1, towards the inside. Number 2, towards one's mind, thoughts, or internal self. So if the being is mistaken and is going to perform this, meaning if one is going to walk the perfected path in this world, they're the nigger. There's no other way. It's the way of the nigger. Number 3, obsolete on the inside, within, inside. Number 4, obsolete in one's mind, thoughts, or internal self. And this is time, space, location, place. This is where the path is. The perfected path lies within. The external path is the path of destruction. It's the path of everything of this world. Is the outward path, the external path. Nautical, towards home. Again, brought into remembrance. The return back to where the being began at the level of birthright or born into spiritual perfection. It's a return. It's towards the direction of home. Synonyms: withinward or inwards, Squidward. Antonyms: outward or outwards. And then we have the noun form: obsolete, chiefly in the plural, that which is inward or within, the inner parts or organs of the body, the viscera. Number 2, obsolete, chiefly in the, so there is no, all three of the noun forms are obsolete. Number 2, obsolete, chiefly in the plural, the mental faculties or other characteristics not immediately apparent. Immediately apparent. Boy, that, if that's not Benton's experience in California, I don't know what it is. Number 3, a familiar friend or acquaintance. What's up, nigga? What's happening, nigga? See, it actually works both ways. Isn't that funny? Almost as if that's why the term came into existence. What eventually began to be viewed as a racial slur and a taboo, right? Now, how many times it's going to be dropped in this new movie, One Battle After Another, that I was crashing out about yesterday? Who knows? Oh, buddy. Still dealing with the damage wrought by the pull-ups. And, oh. But we're on the mend. We're on the mend. And you know what? Healing will come out of this, certainly. Right? Tearing oneself down in a way to build oneself back up. And then, you know, humility, right? Humility. To accept accountability and say, yeah, Benton as a performer and a personality, this is a ridiculous person. Well, what does person mean? You know, well, person is not the perfected path within. What does person mean? Good question. And then the internal, the spiritual attack via mockery and ridicule is based on the idea, well, nobody's a ridiculous person. But now Benton has performed as a ridiculous person. So, you know, he needs to feel some type of way. But what Benton understands is, well, everybody that's not on the inward path, that's a silly person. That's a comically ridiculous person. But it's the performance is dressed up and seemingly, as long as it meets the status quo and the social contracts and it adheres and conforms to the peer groups, everybody just sort of pretends like they themselves are not ridiculous, their family is not ridiculous, and their local community is not ridiculous. You're ridiculous. Okay. Your family's ridiculous. Your local community is motherfucking clown shoes, Jack. And whether the being sees that or not, you know. So humility in this case is the pride goeth before the fall part is, it's to identify with any possibility whatsoever of the outward performance not being comically calamitous when the being then seeks to be viewed some type of way. And based on his own desire to be useful and wanting to be used as a resource by other people because of what? This seeming attainment, which is not an attainment because the perfected path is always lies within, nigger. Why are you putting on a zoot suit? Huh? You zooted and booted? Cock of the walk? Strutting your stuff? Beating your chest? That's what's happening at the age of 50? You gray-haired bozo? And I like my gray hair, but that's not even really the point. Well, the spirit knows nothing of any of that. That's dead. That's all dead anyway. Well, spirit doesn't know what you're talking about. Huh? What? 50? Act your age, not your shoe size. What? Who says who? Act. Well, the path is to not act. The path is to not behave. Right? The path is, what's wrong with a little silliness? I mean, Is the being not a ridiculous person solely based on their ability to discipline and control themselves to not let the silliness, which is associated with what? A childlike spirit? Oh, wait a minute. Is that a bringing unto remembrance? Is that a return home? If the being returns home to spirit, the spiritually perfected innocence of the child, inwardly, there's got to be some silliness in there somewhere. Now it's what? Death of silliness? Well, that's the exaltation of curse and the detriment of blessing. Inverted. Instead of the exaltation of blessing and the detriment of curse, which is how it's supposed to be, arguably. Well, the perfected path necessitates such. Nigger. Person, noun, one, an individual who has been granted personhood, usually a human being. What's personhood? The state or period of being a person, the status of being considered as a person. So let's get into the rest of the definitions. And then, so below that first definition is 6 discrete definitions. So we have one person, noun, and then so we have 6 definitions of just the first definition of person, and then we have 5 more definitions of person. So this is already fraught with peril, clearly. And this is a construction. This is a construct. Number 1, a character or part, as in a play. Sound familiar? Sounds like death to me. A specific kind of manifestation of individual character, whether in real life. Why is that not in quotation marks? This definition is certainly not resolving and solving for waking dreams, surrealistic unreality, or that would be in quotes. Or in literary or dramatic representation and assumed character. Number 2, Christianity. Any one of the 3 hypostases of the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, or Holy Spirit. Interesting. So is this secular society already co-opting an inward spiritual experience of walking a path? You can't walk no line. Well, you can't walk no line and pass yourself off as Christian in this realm. That's for sure. It's one or the other. You're going to status quo and social contract and conformity to peer groups your way to within the context of Christianity, right? Christian nigger. I don't think so. It doesn't seem possible. Number 3, any sapient or socially intelligent being. Number 4, in parentheses, in a compound noun or noun phrase, someone who likes or has an affinity for a specified thing. Life is breakfast cereal, Mikey likes it. So just because of needing to be a person in a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, in the context of the television commercial, someone who likes or has an affinity for a specified thing, in this case, the breakfast cereal called Life. Well, Mikey had no choice but to like it, right? Or his family might say, "You the black sheep of the family, partner. You the black sheep, the nigger." Bah. The normie bozo family goes, "Bah. Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool, nigger?" Wow. Imagine entertaining all of this and retaining one's sanity. I hope the knife's edge balance is appreciated here. Oh man. Number 5, in a compound noun or noun phrase, a human of unspecified gender in terms usually constructed with man or woman. Number 6, in a compound noun or noun phrase, a worker in a specified function or specialty. Number 2, that's the end of the breakdown of the first definition. So back to the main thread. The physical body of a being seen as distinct from the mind, character, etc. from the 14th century show. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bunch of Silliness. Number 3, law, any individual or formal organization with standing before the courts. Legal personhood, right? We've heard a lot about this in the so-called truth community, certainly. Number 4, law, euphemism, the human genitalia, specifically the penis. Huh, that's interesting. You'll have to revisit that later. Not sure what to do with that one. 5, grammar, a linguistic category used to distinguish between the speaker of an utterance and those to whom or about whom they are speaking. See grammatical person from the 14th century. 6, biology, a shoot or bud of a plant, a polyp or zooid of the compound hydrozoa, anthozoa, etc., also an individual in the narrowest sense among the higher animals. Nigger. Use a biological nigger. Oh, man. It hurts so good. Come on, baby, make it hurt so good. Sometimes death don't feel like it should. It makes me hurt so good. Bow, bow, boom, boom, boom. Well, we can check in with the chat. See what they're doing down there. Yep. Delivered from the booze. Indeed. And what is drunkenness? What is to imbibe alcohol? Poison, to drink poison. What is represented symbolically by the being choosing to drink what he knows to be poison? Well, it's obliteration. Obliteration. Of what? It's seeking to obliterate what? The nigger. Kill that nigger. And see something that can't even be spoken. And we've gone from crashing out over a movie to speaking aloud where someone could hear me and saying things like that. Again, the realm itself is manifesting in a way to preclude the individual from even entertaining these concepts and notions, much less speaking them aloud. All right. To what? To do the realm doing everything it can to avoid the individual going inward, because that's where the path perfected is located in the context of time, space, location, place. And that is viewed as the highest level threat to this system of things, the world of death and the game of lies. Because what I am doesn't have a concept of insecurity or lack. The antithesis, this realm, that which makes an enemy of what I am, right? Which is certainly pertaining in this context. See, it properly, if it could even be said to properly understand, right? Perhaps only within a thought experiment, but it's the lack of these characteristics. But then to treat Benton in such a way that, yeah, well, obviously the realm can't do anything about Benton's free will or Benton's ability to access the path that lies inwardly or inward, right? But based on the notions of antithesis, the realm, in using its system agents or sysigents, right, And again, back to the concept on previous live streams of, a dissident sysigent systems agent, right? Because Benton made the case that solely based on the definition of the terms that each individual is behaving as an agent of the system at various times, whether they want to or not. And in fact, a major theme of the Christ path and this the teachings of the Gospels and all of this seems to be tied up in walking the inward path, come what may. And then we have, well, here's Saul of Tarsus, aka the Apostle Paul, to go ahead and put his stink on it, to to take what remained in the oral tradition of the teachings attributed to the Lord Christ Jesus and just put his own stench and fuckery on it, and then pass that off as a religion via man's authority. Are you crazy? And then while recognizing, antithesis recognizing from its perspective that humans, after being sacrificed to Moloch's machine of industrial and post-industrial society, will do almost anything to avoid being treated and viewed and met as a nigger or a coolie, right? Or a slave engaged in back-breaking labor. Now, what do we see American society as? The vast majority of all individuals are behaving like coolies or enslaved persons doing back-breaking labor, even if it's the notion of psyops, because physical wounds heal. At a certain point, don't threaten me with the good time of the fucking salt mines and some version of a work camp. This is the Nazi experiment. This is work camp as Nazi fucking experiment. An entire country of psychological damage, emotional damage. Breaking rocks all day and carrying them up a fucking mountainous flight of stairs or whatever in a war, right? Who knows if any of this happened, but supposedly how the certain people, captured by the enemy were made to behave, right? During World War II, purportedly. And what's the relevance of that? That sounds like a fucking picnic compared to what the royal we and the individuals in this fucking hell realm are dealing with in the corporate hellscape. I mean, yeah, maybe in these worker camps, some people did drag 80% of their body weight up a steep incline until they died with little to no food. Compare that to your average shift at the McDonald's these days. I'd probably choose the attempting to drag 75% of my body weight up the steep incline until I'm dead while fasting, right? While getting just enough food to continue the process. And then Nazi scientists and actuaries are calculating, well, based on how many are arriving at the camp. And again, Holocaust deny, it doesn't even matter if this really happened or not. This is a thought experiment. And then, to give the being enough food to have them pass away, while accounting for how many of them will just be murked by the sadistic guards, right? Pre-selected, selected for their sadism. And then to run that process, and then to realize that's what life in corporate hellscape dystopia is. It's all of these actuarial tables and, now AI and these various computer systems is computing, okay, what's the maximum torture and damage psychologically that these people can endure, and to operate it in the way that suits the system, meaning, well, there's going to be a certain number of individuals that, will plausibly show up to work at an Amazon warehouse for a time. And then Amazon knowing ahead of time that it's going to at some point burn through the entirety of the American populace that would be willing, capable, and able to show up and work however many months of shifts at the Amazon warehouse. And how's that any different than whatever the Nazis were supposedly up to? Well, it's the same system. It's the Nazi system. So tell me again that, Americans are not some version of political prisoners or enslaved persons. The working class, perhaps the most likely, or just because of not being willing, capable, or to go out here and serve evil as overtly as possible, to get a Lamborghini and a Brazilian butt lift without going into septic shock and dying because they went to somebody who does it out of some back alley somewhere. And then what's the butt lift even about? What's the individual seeking via the butt lift, Well, it's not the path, it's not the perfected path within. Of course, the high round booty is typically associated with black person, right? Reminds me of a Tribe Called Quest seminal album, The Low End Theory. And now it's 2025 and BBLs are normalized. And it's just treated as normal because of what? Status quo, social contract, conformity to peer groups, which is there to do what? It's not to facilitate proper society. It's not there so that people can feed their children, feed their families, and raise their children. That's not that difficult to do at the level of putting enough food into them and enough nutrients into them and sheltering them enough that they're able to, physically, the body grow. Because that's really what we're talking about is there's a minimum subsistence standard that must be accessed or it's a crime, right? The parents go to prison. And then that's been attached to notions around consumer society, consumerism as national religion of, well, no, we're actually subjecting, the society choosing to subject itself to these various mechanisms because, oh, well, we got to feed our families. Why? Because it's a crime not to? And what are they being fed? Oh, we got to feed our families McDonald's. Okay. Well, I can go get that out of the garbage. So how's that, how's that in any way an atonement of the performance of labor within the context of a corporate hellscape and paying taxes to the federal government? Again, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus not do were he here? Well, he might be perhaps taking some food out of the garbage when he weren't fasting and walking around preaching and teaching. But I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be working at the McDonald's and paying federal income taxes. Oh, but render unto Caesar. Okay. While not knowing the meaning of the phrase. Because Saul of Tarsus came along later and put his own stench on it and fucked the meaning right out of it. Nigger. You can't walk no line. Well, Johnny Cash couldn't walk no line. He was a good boy. How many records did Johnny Cash sell? How much money did he make for Moloch's machine? Yeah, he's been everywhere, man, in the pursuit of evil, in the pursuit of antithesis. Anything to avoid that path of the nigger. Johnny Cash was the nigger. Hell, his parents were white cotton picking sharecroppers in Arkansas, not that far from where I'm from. In fact, Johnny Cash was born not that far from where I was born. But then they moved to the northeastern part of Arkansas, which is still the Delta. He was somewhat closer to the Mississippi River than old Benton, but not that much. But sing the gospel, singing the old gospel, the old Negro spirituals, right? After presumably being sacrificed to Moloch's machine and making whatever deal with the so-called devil he made and got rich. He got his start singing Negro spirituals. Johnny Cash was a nigger. Jesus Christ was a nigger. See, Johnny didn't like it. So Johnny was offered the kingdoms of this world in a way. He said, hell yeah, sign me up, partner. Let me get some of that good. I'm trying to drive around in a big black Cadillac and eat some Quaaludes and snort some powders and, go to Jackson and mess around. I'm going to Jackson. Look out, Jackson Town. It's right there. And the people can't see it. And there are no people. Yeah, there's person. There's people, places, and things. Back to the alcohol analogy. So what is the alcohol? It's the obliteration of what? Of understanding the perfected path within and recognizing that it cannot be, there's no separating the walking of that path from the path of being treated as a nigger. So that's where the persecution comes from. That's where the mockery and ridicule comes from. It can be no other way here. And it lines up with the Bible when Christ said, hey, the servant is not greater than the master. You saw what they done to me. They're going to do it to you too. Just you wait, buddy. Put your big boy pants on and deal with it, partner. And what did they tell Johnny Cash? They probably told him the same thing. They told me growing up. Hey man, you think you're going to whine and cry about your plight? Suck it up. Don't be a pussy, little boy. We ain't got time for such foolishness. There's cotton to pick. There's rich men to be made richer. Or do you want to wear sackcloth the rest of your life? Whether literal, metaphorical, or both. Or just figurative sackcloth. The figurative sackcloth of the Negro. Well, I'm a ridiculous. Benton expresses as a ridiculous person either way, and that's Paul's version of regardless of his intention, he serves evil. Well, no, regardless of his intention, he is a ridiculous person. But guess who can still walk that path? The perfected path. Ridiculous people. See? And we see the game. The game is there. It's for anybody to find it. But what can't happen is there's no possibility of external meaning around resolving such. See? Because Benton will always exhibit ridiculous performance in the context of this place, because to walk the perfected path within is the walk of the nigger. And that will only ever be made ridiculous at some point in the external, which seeks to apply its own meaning to the inward path, right? Through saying, well, there has to be meaning. It can't be nihilism. It's like, well, wait a minute. Yes, of course it can be. If we're talking about time, space, location, place, and an entire status quo and social contract and society based on doing anything to avoid walking the perfected path within, like, what are you talking about? Huh? That's the entire point of the social contract. To have just enough resources to continue one's life, or death rather, as long as they serve corporations that in turn serve to make rich families, and I'm talking about actual wealth, for they must see their riches expand every new moment into perpetuity, or they don't know who they are. Because you know what? If their wealth can't expand every new moment into perpetuity, they might be the nigger. Anything but that. A fate worse than death. Well, this is death. What are you talking about? See? Which is what? The people who serve this realm the most, in the way to receive the most death, right? They are the lovers of death. They want all the death you can give them all day long, every day, twice on Sunday. Bring it. Bring it. Well, okay, render unto Caesar. That's what they want. Give it to them. Meanwhile, what does the system say? Eat the rich. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I don't know if I'm going to be tasked with eating an elephant metaphorically, perhaps starve the elephant first. Right? Eat the rich, starve the rich. It's right there in the name. It's right there in the phrase, consume or eat. Oh, you mean the working class is feeding the rich? Preparing them a table? The working class providing the food and the fattening of the rich? Starting to sound like Psalm 23 a little bit there, in a way. Isn't that interesting? Their cup of death runneth over, and it's to cut. They've cut themselves off from the path, and they cannot return to the inward path. See, not my problem. I'm down here with y'all. What a blessing. And poor folks and working class folks can't fucking stand each other. But love that pat on the head from the whoever's, running the show at the job, right? Oh, the district manager's here. Oh, great. Better act like I'm doing my job. I mean, what's the BBL for? So that the person can go to the job, and maybe when the booty warrior Fleece Johnson shows up, that old Fleece will be even more titillated when he takes the being to Pound Town. If anybody watches a Millennial Steam channel, one of my favorite channels, to get the pat on the butt, right? And the attaboy or attagirl from serving that corporation and paying them taxes and paying for all of this. It's the people's checkbook. Keep fattening up. But tell me again how air quotes so-called God is in charge. Jesus take the wheel. Yeah, Jesus is going to ride in the limo in Fight Club and just look at you and be like, "Oh, you thought I was going to take the wheel? Shit, we finna crash, partner. Brace yourselves, fool. Break yourself, fool." Fucking cranium about to bounce off that windshield. Solar plexus into a steering wheel. Shit, old Benton, he's a thrill seeker type. He's ejected out the back window. Look at him fly 200 feet through the air. There he goes. Hell, he landed on his feet. Reminds me of when they dropped him out of that loader onto that concrete. Hell, he could have been killed right there. What, in a world of death and a game of lies? Shit. Did Benton miss his opportunity to, while he was trying to drink himself to death, miss his chance to have his brains dashed out on the concrete? Of course, there's always the chance of surviving it and ending up some version of a traumatic brain injury survivor. That's always possible, right? Maybe I could be in somebody's YouTube live chat. Shit posting. Maybe I could be taught how to conduct myself to, at various times, get tens of thousands of dollars in settlements and, for my profession. And that's tax-free. I don't know if y'all know that. If there's a settlement and the county or the city or the state or whatever, it's like, oh, here's your $80,000. That's not taxable. So certain folks they're not paying taxes. See, and then we have people in the so-called truth community that would say, well, he's not pulling his weight. What do you mean by not being a plow horse of death? You better go pull that plow of death. It's a death farm. Death Farm 5000. You better go pull that plow of death. Who you think you are? Otherwise, we're gonna treat you like the nigger that you are, partner. Think you're gonna walk a path of Jesus? Think you're gonna walk like Jesus walked? Is you crazy? Shit. Good luck. Bless your heart. Give us this day our corporate slavery. Anything but the nigger. Meanwhile, the corporate slave is the nigger from the perspective of this world. Meanwhile, they wouldn't give me a cup of water at the Starbucks to rinse my mouth out yesterday in downtown LA. Because they said, well, we see that you got to make a purchase. Well, I said, well, I am a Starbucks customer, just not at this moment. But, well, if we gave you a cup of water out of the tap, well, we'd have to give, and we understand you're a presentable, well-behaved nigger, but see, if we give you water, house nigger, we're gonna have to give these field niggers water. And these lovers of death and servers of corporate death that you see in their nice clothes and obediently, calmly, just sitting there before their laptops. We can't keep this location open with a bunch of field niggers coming in and out of this place wanting water. Is you crazy? So yeah, it wouldn't be fair because we're equitable. We're practicing equality. And they didn't tell me this. I knew all of this. It's like, yeah, obviously it wouldn't be fair to give the house nigger a cup of water to rinse his mouth out because he brought a backpack too small to hold apricots and his own bottle of water. Right? But why waste $2 on a liter of water when the being can get drunk, waste it getting drunk and eating pizza? And it's not a waste, but I don't know, maybe just buy the water next time, nigger. And so it is the service of death that atones the nigger. The nigger is consecrated, see, based on a system of death, just by doing whatever it took to have the fiat. See, that is the absolution. It's the instrument of absolution in this world of death. It's redemptive, see, but based on the lack of all of the characteristics of what I am, see. It's garish, ghoulish, perverse. And the fact that people don't flee it onto the path, it's astonishing. And the Lord Christ Jesus probably can't speak, to that thought process, but imagine seeing and understanding all of that in real time and being like, wow, they're really doing this thing, aren't they? They're really doing it. And more, that's old Benton's attitude. It's like, wow, they're really, because this is what was being done and what was being performed when they entered into this place. They're really just going to continue to do all of these things. Yeah, status quo, social contract, conformity to peer groups, in-group, out-group dynamics. Simple. Simple to control these beings. Simpletons. Because they will do anything to avoid being the nigger. Anything. And they think I might be a sex worker. It's like, well, because surely sex work is preferable to being the nigger. And I'm like, hell no. Give me 2 helpings of nigger before one serving of sex worker. Crazy. They'd have to pay me. And even then it's a no. But that's what a sex worker is, see. But I mean, I'm not interested in the first place. They'd have to pay me to even have me consider it. Right. And so how many people run cons and scams because of people's lust and these lovers of death? See. But to slave for the corporation is to give Fleece Johnson, the booty warrior, free access to the back end. Well, I mean, in some way, the sex worker's just cutting to the chase and saying, "Well, hey, how about way more money, right? But skip the acceptance." See, but more and more, it's becoming socially acceptable in a way, right? And the sons and daughters of America on OnlyFans, lest we forget. And somehow that's preferable and less shameful than Benton as nigger, right? And being representative of the white racist establishment, as if, yeah, I'm sure Johnny Cash's cotton picking, sharecropping parents, that's what they were, right? I'm sleeping in a car, but who cares? So what? A lot of people are showing up every day to get pounded by fleece. Thank you, sir. May I have another? And then I try to watch these clips of Brian Callen and Brendan Schaub, and I can't even watch them anymore because it's right there on Front Street. That because he's a comedian, Brian Callen is free to say things that are the truth, but then it's like, oh, well, he must be joking on something. He's not joking when he says he's asked how many back shots would he take for $100,000 a shot, and he said line them up as many as are available. He said I'll uh, until I got $1 billion in the bank. He said, so then I'll go take a shower and go off to enjoy my life more or less. And I've heard him say versions of this, but he's not joking, right? And there's this Mike Israetel who's became an influencer and has become not wealthy but temporarily experiencing relative affluence. And he was asked on an interview, how did he get to be a high enough level influencer to make however many million a year. And he basically, if you read between the lines, he basically said he found the people who could provide that to him, and he gave everybody BJs with a great enthusiasm and attention to doing it as well as he was able to. That's what the man said, and he wasn't joking. Because why would a person like that and a lover of death, why would they have shame? Because remember, from the perspective of this system, the walker of the path that lies internally, that's the shameful nigger. Not somebody who says, well, they want to live a certain type of death, right? They want, let the dead bury the dead means what? To seek what this realm has to offer. They're going out to the people who have access to death merchants, and saying, hey, let me get some of that death, partner. I heard you got that good. Let me get some of that. And then how highly motivated is the individual? That's this world. That is a world of death. Meanwhile, these good-hearted people who might want to raise their families and who have been so mind controlled and Stockholm syndrome that they think it's possible to make the world a better place, or to maybe live in a proper society again. And what I say is, you've never lived in a proper society, and you never will, because proper society it would lack the capabilities to degenerate into this current level of hellscape. So yeah, keep romanticizing the past. It was this. The path that was being walked by society in the recent past, it was the path to what's happening now. It's the same path. It's not an accident. It wasn't a bunch of people walking the path of righteousness who just happened to take a left turn and ended up in a quagmire. That's not what happened. But that's what people believe because they're idiots. And if Benton wants to keep making proper turds like he did this morning, in spite of how he's treated his body temporarily, well, Benton has no choice but to what? Grieve, alchemize via emotional processes and spiritual processes, and fucking move on. Get busy living or get busy dying. And the get busy living is to walk the inward path through the valley of the shadow of death, the underworld, right? To maybe, hopefully, vibrate the fuck up out of here at some point. And not, if the soul trap is a thing, to not have to continuously come back here, which is the same as never leaving, if you think about it. It's just to be stuck here. And the only coping mechanism is the walking of the perfected path that lies inward, nigger. How I learned to stop worrying and love the nigger. What's up, Christos? Got your ears on? Eyeballs, click, sir. Ears open, sir. Never quite got to eat the crayons, though. Didn't quite make it to crayon eater. I'm going to read that article again because the crash out of yesterday. This will be instructive, and that's a mighty fine hour and a half if I dare to toot my own horn there. So anyway, that's not Benton Hedna. It's the inward path. So yeah, forget about. Let's not go back to the puffing up of pride, sir. Which is really just it's not even pride. It's the idea of pride or ego. That's the inverse. It's actually to refuse the humility, to be offered humility and refuse it. That's what people are actually referring to when they talk about pride and ego. It's to refuse the opportunity to practice humility. Say, no, I'm good on all that. Pride in the it's anyway. Let's not even get into it. But yeah, let's read this article again. This is I almost don't even know what to say at this point. But so this is that movie premiere, available for in selected cities starting night before last, and it's set in Los Angeles, and it's Paul Thomas Anderson, who's probably considered the #1 director right now, writer-director, and based on the way they're going to describe it in this article, I'm starting to think actually that it was probably written for maybe somebody. Well, maybe Robert Rodriguez wrote it. Maybe he's another writer director. Maybe Robert Rodriguez wrote it, but seems to be in his style, which is similar to Tarantino's style. And maybe the system wanted it attached specifically to a white director. That could be possible. But and so if you guys listen to me read this, and gals, if there's any gals, if you folks listen to me read this, what's the relevant factor is the current climate in the news cycle, and the fact that virtually everybody, even with elements of so-called trutherism, conspiracy theories, well, the normie's a baby truther, so what's the fucking difference at this point? But give me a second, I'm gonna drink some water. There's something in here really, and I might skip some of the there's some detailed breakdowns of the differences between the characters of the book and the characters of the movie. So some of that got a little, the main thing, other than the context of the news cycle and the zeitgeist, is just how complicated and convoluted the plot is, meaning people are not going to be able to follow this plot. And even Benton, when I go see a film, and I, again, fancy boy, lover of film in ways, artsy fartsy, I almost always go read about the plot first because I want a framework for what I'm about to see. I'm not trying to be surprised, right? Maybe don't spoil the thing entirely, but the wild political story that inspired the movie One Battle After Another. The novels of Thomas Pynchon which include towering canonical works such as Gravity's Rainbow and V, are challenging. They're also brilliant, intoxicating, hilarious, maddening, and vulgar, aggressively lampooning the fascist capitalist sweep of history, and rich, sometimes overwhelmingly so, with cultural references. These challenges are key to his appeal among devotees, including Paul Thomas Anderson, the beloved director whose latest project, One Battle After Another, is a loose adaptation of Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland. The film marks his second time grappling with the postmodern author's ideas on screen, following 2014's Inherent Vice, a rueful, R-U-E-F-U-L, a rueful elegy to California counterculture, which was itself the first and to date only official adaptation of Pynchon in cinema. Nearly 20 years before Inherent Vice was published in 2009, Pynchon mourned the death of the revolutionary spirit. And that's a key phrase. And if anybody takes notes, I doubt anybody listens to these discourses. What I would say is if you have a notebook and a pen at the ready, at times it could be instructive to write down a phrase or make a note. So if I was listening, there would be a chance that I would want to write down revolutionary spirit of the 1960s, just as a concept. So Pynchon mourned the death of the revolutionary spirit of the 1960s. And I understand that people will immediately say, oh, well, PSYOP, government agent. Yeah, it's always that way. Why are we seeking to negate? With Vineland, an expansive postmodern work that toggles between intricately detailed conspiracies and satire of radical politics and sudden, striking emotional clarity, a tonal shift that is key to Pynchon's style. Got a little fell into a temporarily strong identification with the strong delusion that is this realm. So bear with me while breathing exercises are needed. We'll skip the full confess, repent, seek forgiveness, and forgiven. We'll probably do that later if necessary. The novel looks backward at a moment in American history when political and cultural upheaval had swallowed whole a generation's homegrown sense of hope. Subversion, in other words. And remember, this is always must be reconciled and solved for equationally and mathematically based on the Unabomber Manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, and other writings attributed to Theodore John Kaczynski. Who was a professor where? Cal Berkeley professor? Oh, you mean those same motherfuckers going up, putting on masks and going to Antifa events and going upside the heads of people with bike locks on the end of chains? You mean those guys? Interesting. So here I would say where it says the novel looks backward at a moment in American history, and this is the so-called blaxploitation, right? And when they say 60s, they really mean very late 60s into the early 70s is really what they mean. It's a specific thing. Well, and some of it would mid 60s would be but now we're getting mired in details. And we're probably going to have to read Angela Davis's Wikipedia page to make any sense of this, which will then necessitate a reading of George Jackson's Wikipedia page against blaxploitation, BLAXPLOITATION. And you get into these movies, and Tarantino, his movie Jackie Brown was in some ways based on his own love of blaxploitation, the blaxploitation genre of film. of that period. And look at the coding here. Cultural upheaval. Well, anybody who looks at what's happening in society and doesn't understand that that is upheaval, right? Upheaval. Now, do we have to go to the dictionary? I don't know. Benton, are you going to make it through this material? What time is it? 6 a.m.? Breathe, Heber, breathe. Upheaval. Noun, disruptive change from one state to another. 2, the process of being heaved upward, especially the raising of parts of the Earth's crust. 3, a sudden, violent upset, disruption, or convulsion. That's what had old Benton crashing out yesterday. I certainly could foresee a sudden, violent upset. Synonym, seismic shift. Idiomatic, a fundamental reorientation of a state of affairs. Interesting. 5:55 a.m. Pacific. So it says the political and cultural upheaval had swallowed whole a generation's homegrown, which is what? Another way to say ad hoc grassroots basis, get in where you fit in style, if Christos is still listening, sense of hope. And what is hope? And my own assertions around individuals seemingly contained within the individual is something I've referred to as a hope station. When Vineland was published, reviewers received it as, quote, Pynchon Light, or in other words, his most accessible novel, almost as if it was dumbed down for the masses in a way, or maybe even Benton's pseudo-intellectual ass, which says a lot. I've read no Pynchon, by the way, which says a lot about how challenging Gravity's Rainbow and V were for readers. And remember, that's the people who are in the downtown LA Starbucks when Benton wanders in there and thinks they might let him have enough water to rinse his mouth out. Vineland begins with the strained relationship between a single dad and his precocious teenage daughter in Northern California before exploding into an exhaustive, non-linear history of a fictional 60s revolutionary group, its unique members, their collapse due to federal interference, and the long years of weary exile that culminate in a reunion for enemies and ex-lovers. And so all of that is to say that with the fear and the chasing of the tail and everything involved in going off to Pound Town every day, and the system running a train on people and Stockholm syndroming them, and again, status quo, social contract and peer groups, this is mind control. And people are going to go see this movie, and they're not going to see it like a white person who's going to say, well, can you believe this propaganda, and this is a bunch of lies, and do you think it matters? This is a world of death and a game of lies. We still have people in 2025 who think that your average bozo even has the faculties to pick and choose their way through the separating of the truth from the falsehood, right? The medium is the massage, motherfucker, right? The medium is the mass age. The medium is the message. So the people will become this in a way. And that is the upheaval. It's the people becoming whatever the system needs them to become, because the individuals that comprise the mass are already, it's already been a lifelong process of making themselves over in the image of this place, in relation to this place. Why would this be any different? But the MAGA right-leaning types who think conservatism is even a possibility, and they say, well, this is clearly ridiculous and will never happen, while meanwhile, ridiculous phenomenon after ridiculous phenomenon after ridiculous phenomenon comes to pass. The booty holes of your children, once they reach majority age, sold on OnlyFans. The novel observes that while the revolutionary spirit of the 1960s was sabotaged by political forces. See, it was the moral righteousness. This is how this is presented: the moral righteousness of everybody who's not a white person, right? So, left to its own devices in a vacuum, it would have set the system right, except for the interference of the white racist establishment represented by uh, the system. See, sabotaged by political forces, the omnipresence of mass culture, the prior mentioned McLuhanism, television, and here's where RT, does anybody know this guy from the so-called truth community called RT? Here's where RT proves himself foolish, is that he thinks that his hero is Ronald Reagan and that man somehow represented conservatism. And what's about to be described is neoliberalism. Now, I disagree with what the system claims neoliberalism to be, but that's neither here nor there. And so what is about to be described is neoliberalism, and that's what the commies, the leftist communist revolutionaries, blame neoliberalism for virtually all society's problems. And that's why George Floyd was a saint to be venerated, is because of the notion that society did this to him. And the fact is, yes, it did in certain ways. But does that absolve him of his own? Does that then confer onto him uh, that he would always rise above, if not for the system? Well, isn't that a description of Moloch's machine? Isn't that antithesis? Because if George Floyd was born into the realm spiritually perfected and innocent as a babe and then sacrificed to the system of things, it's the system itself acknowledging what the system does and using it to its own purposes. Propaganda, rubbing our noses in it through George Floyd and what he represented. See? And passive consumption in the Reagan era would also factor heavily into the struggle of subversive political movements to endure. But then RT still thinks Reagan was a conservative hero. No, neoliberalism was birthed out of Ronald Reagan as governor of California, viewing what happened at Kent State and saying, I quote, if it's going to be a bloodbath, let's do it. Meaning, what are we waiting for? If we're going to wait around and we're going to have meetings and we're going to have, the Black Panthers in here to negotiate, because lest we forget, the government brought in Black Panthers to negotiate with the hostage takers during the Attica prison riot of the 1970s. And how did that end? The New York State Police retook the prison by bursting in after negotiations failed and shotgunned the hostage takers and the hostages. Treated them like niggers, in other words. Because do you think the system cares when one nigger takes another nigger hostage to try to seize power and effect change within the system? Well, that ain't allowed, nigger. And these are the dynamics that your average American, now the over-socialized, in the context of Kaczynskiism, the over-socialized, again, neoliberal establishment understands this because they've been educated. And I mean educated in the collectivist Marxist sense. They've chose to subject themselves to a neoliberal process. Which they say, what do you mean? Isn't this seemingly at cross purposes? Yeah, it is. Doesn't that sound like mind control and satanic ritual abuse? For the being to subject themselves to a process that's administrated and operated by people who claim adherence to Marxist collectivist ideology of the far left, who were university professors. See? But in what? A capitalist society that's always having to solve for equationally and mathematically at the level of John Nash game theory optimal mathematics, has to account for neoliberalism, so-called, which that's your Pepsi generation. That's your take the Pepsi challenge. That's your Coca-Cola. It's the real thing. That's Don Draper. You know, the end of the Don Draper from Mad Men story is him sitting cross-legged, you know, somewhere in Northern California, meditating and coming up with, you know, I'd like to teach the world to sing, right? The most successful ad campaign of all time. Again, subversion, an ideological subversion. See? Well, ideology itself is subversive if, from the proper perspective, is it not? You tell me. I don't fucking know. Seems like it. Now, see, the intellectual would listen to everything I'm saying here, and they're only ever going to run it through the gamut of various ideologies and up to the minute adherence to intersectionality and all of these things. And they do not, they must put their own stink on it, right? Just like Saul of Tarsus, you know. So if some of this is manifesting truth, well, they have no choice but to run it through the gamut of ideology, see, because they're slaves to ideology, so that they can go watch me and say, can you believe this nigger came in here and thought he was going to get a cup of water to rinse his mouth out? No, back to the Whole Foods with you, sir, to suck off the fucking, to suck off the bathroom spigot faucet. Hope you don't catch your death. He. Because who knows what other nigger didn't have their armpit up under there 5 minutes before. What, just to have some dental hygiene? To be able to hike 5 miles round trip to carry back 14 pounds of apricots in a can? Right? Mockery and ridicule and indignities of all types and descriptions. It's just too intimidating. My brain's not big enough, Anderson said in 2014 when asked about adapting Vineland. And he hasn't budgeted on this. He hasn't budged on this conviction. One battle after another is not Vineland on screen, but rather a novel and simplified story suggested from Vineland's core conflict. Anderson succinctly summed up his adaptation process in an interview with star Leonardo DiCaprio for Esquire. Vineland was always going to be too hard to adapt, so I stole the parts that spoke to me and just started running like a thief. It's unclear whether any Pynchon novel would benefit from becoming IMAX spectacle. But in staging his highest budgeted film so far, Mr. Anderson, has refashioned Vineland's key themes into a straightforward but singular and exhilarating romp. driven by the essential cinematic momentum of escape and pursuit. The movie follows a flailing and failing father's quest to save his daughter as a way to establish his credentials as a loving father in the here and now rather than a broken relic of a thwarted revolution. Again, upheaval. But why is nobody solving the equations for Kaczynskiism? Because when I read thwarted revolution, I read, well, all revolutions that originate from within the system will only ever be thwarted, in meaning that they will serve the system itself to further propagate and reinforce the system. We meet Bob Ferguson DiCaprio, formerly known as Ghetto Pat, the one-time munitions expert of the Los Angeles-based revolutionary group, the French 75. Far from his revolutionary heyday, and I want to point out that when I got drunk and was a silly person in the streets of Los Angeles, that near the movie theater, the propagandists had stapled white pieces of paper with DiCaprio's face and the text, the French 75. Right. So this is now 60s, 70s blaxploitation revolutionaries as consumer product, right? Everything is a business, even these revolutionary movements, Black Panthers and all of these groups. So I want to read now, I think it's important to get into the revolutionary aspects and probably have to tie it in with Attica at some point. But we're going to go read Angela Davis's Wikipedia page, if you don't mind. And remember, she's still a professor emeritus in Southern California, in Los Angeles, at UCLA, lest we forget. Just to sort of bring home that, yeah, Benton, who knows what's going to happen to old Benton. But that's always in play. Angela Yvonne Davis, born January the 26th, 1944, is an American Marxist and feminist political activist, philosopher, academic, and author. She is Distinguished Professor Emerita of Feminist Studies and History of Consciousness at the University of California, Santa Cruz. My bad, I said UCLA. I believe she was a professor at UCLA. Davis was a longtime member of the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, and a founding member of the Committee of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, CCDS. She was active in movements such as the Occupy movement and the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign. Born in Birmingham, Alabama. Occupation, activist, scholar. Other political party, CCDS, since 1991. Other political affiliations, Communist Party USA, 1969. See that whole thing around the 60s? Was no 69 to 91. Also the Black Panther Party. I don't want to read this entire thing. Education. Brandeis University, if I'm saying that right. University of Frankfurt, interesting. University of California, San Diego. And if anybody remembers East and West Germany, this would have been back during East and West Germany. Let's see. Critical theory, black feminism, Marxism. Now, what is critical theory? Critical theory is a social, historical, and this is what I mean when I allow myself to become frustrated and angry with the so-called right. They don't know any of this. If anybody even mentions Angela Davis, it's immediate mockery and ridicule. Well, I hate to break it to you, that's the lefty playbook, is mockery and ridicule. She's immune. You can't mock and ridicule Angela Davis. It's not possible. You can't mock the people who've gone to university and have internalized these notions at the level of ideology. They just look at you like, okay, whatever. Critical theory is a social, historical, and political school of thought and philosophical perspective which centers on, and they wait for the rally so they can go upside your head with a bike lock, partner, or the cops' heads with a bike lock on a chain. Of thought and philosophical perspective, which centers, this is ideology, it's an ideology, which centers on analyzing and challenging, but it's a performance of an ideology, on analyzing and challenging systemic power relations in society, arguing that knowledge, truth, and social structures are fundamentally shaped by power dynamics between dominant and oppressed groups. And dominant in this context would be Ronald Reagan, neoliberalism, and, you know, Benton as the Mr. Peanut of the white racist establishment because of his accent and just how he comes across. Beyond just understanding and critiquing these dynamics, it explicitly aims to transform society through praxis and collective action with an explicit socio-political purpose. So what's praxis? Under Marxism, the Hegelian dialectic, apparently. Problem, reaction, solution, I'm assuming. So let's not get too deep into that. Critical theory's main tenets center on analyzing systemic power relations in society, focusing on the dynamics between groups with different levels of social, economic, and institutional power. Unlike traditional social theories that aim primarily to describe and understand society, critical theory explicitly seeks to critique and transform it. Thus, it positions itself as both an analytical framework and a movement for social change. Critical theory examines how dominant groups and structures influence what society considers to be objective truth, challenging the very notion of pure objectivity and rationality by arguing that knowledge is shaped by power relations and social context. Key principles of critical theory include examining intersecting forms of oppression, emphasizing historical context and social analysis, and critiquing capitalist structures. The framework emphasizes praxis, combining theory with action, and highlights how lived experience, collective action, ideology, and educational systems play crucial roles in maintaining or challenging existing power structures. Meanwhile, people who think they're right-leaning traditional family values and MAGA types, they can't have a scholar in their midst, such as Benton, who actually understands this well enough to discourse on it and can actually have conversations with Marxists and communists in the streets and understand what they mean when they talk about objective truth. They mean something very specific. See, they will define what is objective truth because they're not going to be challenged by the right wing, so-called, because the right wing is unable to challenge them. So what this does is it creates a strategy whereby ideology of the left wing will succeed in painting Benton and what he represents symbolically via his own humanity, right, and his accent and his bearing and how he comes across. That will then be symbolic of oppression itself. And that's where all of this privilege talk leads to, in a way. And MAGA, and this is why Benton is frequently angered and frustrated and irritated by MAGA, because they could understand these dynamics. They refuse to because of how ridiculous they seem. Meanwhile, I don't have a dog in that hunt. Benton is the spirit of, hey, bozos, you could understand this, you choose not to. Because book learning is faggotry on some level. Independent critical thinking is faggotry from the perspective of the so-called right wing. While they send their sons and daughters to university to be indoctrinated by leftists so that they can do what? Serve this system of death. To get the pat on the head of the Federal Reserve notes. This is a trap. Challenging the very notion of pure objectivity. See, but while asserting their own objective truth that left to his own devices in a vacuum, that They on the one hand, George Floyd will symbolize the I am, that thing which is incorruptible unless society messes with it, and then will simultaneously use Christianity as a symbol of, through the doctrine of Paul, to say, well, Benton here can't ever represent that because Paul wrote about in the Bible that regardless of the purity of Paul's intention, he ends up serving the system anyway, which is to represent the system. And remember, it's the system that was able to make George Floyd manifest in the way that he manifested. Because left to his own devices in a vacuum, George Floyd would represent the objective truth of I am. See, this is not my assertions. This is how the dynamics play out. Oh, but Rules for Radicals is dedicated to Lucifer before it even gets to the material. Thus, no Christian can even read the book. So now Christians, so-called, and family values people are now have learned how to mimic the ideology at a behavioral level. They're performing Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals because they've observed the tactics of Antifa, and in the arms race of, well, we got to do it to them because they're doing it to us, they've been subsumed and they've been assimilated by the leftist Borg, and they don't even know it. Yesterday's leftist is today's MAGA, folks. They're always behind the curve. Benton is always slightly ahead of the curve in many ways. See how it works? And how can Benton read 2 paragraphs on critical theory when he didn't even really know what it was, although I probably could have guessed? And tell me again, Yurt, why I need to read all these books? If Benton has an intuitive and other grasp of the material, why do I need to read the book? Just like when I made a B in world literature at the 101 level in college. If I can make a B in world lit by writing a couple of papers and making the professor giggle, why do I need to read the motherfucking books, Yurt? I like to read books. I like to read the books I like to read. Not the books I'm told to read. Yurt, that's you, Podna. And that's okay. But why are you trying to make me into you, buddy? If anybody knows who I'm talking about. I ain't you. And you ain't me. And shouldn't that be okay? Davis Angela was born in Birmingham, Alabama. She studied at Brandeis, I'm sure I'm butchering that, University, and the University of Frankfurt, where she became increasingly engaged in far-left politics. She also studied at the University of California, San Diego, UCSD, before moving to East Germany. So she moved to a communist country, where she completed some studies for a doctorate at the University of Berlin. After returning to the United States, but she will call you a Nazi. See, you're the Nazi. I don't know, Angela. I didn't study in Berlin. So what are you going to tell me, Angela? But Angela has helped create a dynamic where, especially if this movie really catches on, Benton's going to be treated like a Nazi. And maybe they'll punch a Nazi. Maybe they'll see Benton's hairline and punch him. I don't fucking know. And that was the crash out of yesterday. Well, who cares at this point? I mean, I'd rather not be punched in the face, but if that's going to happen, maybe I need to go buy a mouth guard so I can keep my teeth. After returning to the United States, she joined CPUSA and became involved in the second wave feminist movement and the campaign against the Vietnam War. In 1969, she was hired as an assistant professor of philosophy at the University of California, UCLA. And I'm almost certain that one Carlos Castaneda was also teaching at UCLA at the time and starting his cult of ladies. Primarily, all ladies, I believe, in the cult. UCLA's governing board of regents soon fired her due to her membership in the CPUSA. Remember the various Red Scares, right? McCarthyism wasn't that long ago. After a court ruled the firing illegal, here's the courts. The university fired her for the use of inflammatory language in 1970. Now, here's where the blaxploitation revolutionary elements come in. In 1970, what they will call this the 60s, in 1970, guns belonging to Davis were used in an armed takeover of a courtroom in Marin County, California. And that's the richest one of the richest counties in the country, lest we forget. Marin is a Sausalito area north of, in Marin, there's a town of Marin, north, go from San Francisco across the bay, into Marin County, north, right? The Golden Gate Bridge, in which 4 people were killed. Prosecuted for 3 capital felonies, including conspiracy to murder, she was held in jail for more than a year before being acquitted of all charges in 1972. During the 1980s, Davis was twice the Communist Party's candidate for Vice President of the United States. In 1997, she co-founded Critical Resistance, an organization working to abolish the prison industrial complex. So that's your communists letting criminals out of prison to effectuate a revolution through lawlessness and critical theory, or the intentional undermining of society, folks. And this is who MAGA sends their children to be indoctrinated by, is people who venerate and uphold the work of Angela Davis, and not understanding that when they see what's the football player, the San Francisco 49er, with the afro, the natural, that's called, actually, with the natural haircut, that's a symbol of Angela Davis. That's her haircut when she was young. Kaepernick. And he said that's his hero. And people couldn't see the coding right in their face because they think that's all ridiculous. They find his hairstyle to be ridiculous. See? So that's his hero. He tweeted about how Angela Davis is his personal hero. And meanwhile, MAGA can't have me around because, he's got too much book learning and sounds like a commie. Okay. What better way to learn the commie tactics than somebody who came from what I've come from, who talks the way I talk, and who, for whatever reason, learned this material. And they can't hear me. See? They could be accepting me with open arms and learning from me, but whatever. That's all right. I don't want to hang out with them either. That same year, she joined the Feminist Studies Department at the University of California, Santa Cruz, go Banana Slugs, where she became department director before retiring in 2008. Davis has received various awards, including the Soviet Union's Lenin Peace Prize. Since 2025, she is its last living recipient, and induction into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Due to accusations that she advocates political violence and due to her support of the Soviet Union, she has been a controversial figure. In 2020, she was listed as the 1971 Woman of the Year in Time Magazine's 100 Women of the Year edition. Neoliberalism celebrates her. In 2020, she was included. In 2025, Davis was awarded an honorary doctorate in letters from the University of Cambridge. Is that Ivy League? So she must be serving rich folks if she's getting those accolades. Or she must really be doing a good job serving a world of death and games of lies to help make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, while she will also teach people to write "Eat the Rich," to scrawl it in crayon, as I see sometimes in this area of LA. Davis was also honored in 2025 with the Jose Munoz Award, given by CLAGS, the Center for LGBTQ Studies at the Cooney Institute Center, CUNY. I forget what that stands for, but I forget what the C stands for. I gotta find out. Yeah, Graduate School and University Center of the City University of New York. City University of New York, yeah. But not New York University, right? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Arrest and trial. See also Marin County Civic Center attacks. Davis was a supporter of the Soledad brothers, and if I was making notes, I would write down Soledad brothers, Soledad. George Jackson was one of the Soledad brothers. 3 inmates who were accused and charged with the killing with killing of a prison guard at Soledad Prison. On August the 7th of 1970, heavily armed 17-year-old African-American high school student Jonathan Jackson, whose brother was George Jackson, one of the three Soledad brothers, gained control of a courtroom in Marin County, California. He armed the black defendants and took Judge Harold Haley, Deputy District Attorney Gary W. Thomas, and three female jurors as hostages. As Jackson transported the hostages and three black defendants away from the courtroom, one of the defendants, James McLean, shot at the police. The police returned fire. The judge and three of the men were killed in the melee. One of the jurors, the prosecutor, and one of the attackers, Ruchel McGee, I guess is what that is, or Ruchel, were injured. Although the judge was shot in the head with a blast from a shotgun, he also suffered a chest wound from a bullet that may have been fired from outside the van. So as we know, especially when you get into multiple shooters, and well, we don't know what direction that bullet may or may not have come from. So you're already looking at the government itself involved, military, right? But remember, Angela Davis is an activist to destroy the military-industrial complex. So purportedly, right? Okay, sure she's not. Evidence during the trial showed that either could have been fatal. Davis had purchased several of the firearms Jackson used in the attack, including the shotgun used to shoot Haley, which she bought at a San Francisco pawn shop 2 days before the incident. She was also found to have been corresponding with one of the inmates involved. Davis had befriended George and Jonathan Jackson doing work attempting to free the Soledad brothers. She had communicated frequently with George Jackson over letters and worked extensively with Jonathan Jackson in her work with the Soledad Brothers Defense Committee. She had grown close with the Jackson family in general during this time while working with them and speaking at events together. As California considers all persons concerned in the commission of a crime, whether they directly commit the act constituting the offense or aid and abet in its commission, are principals in any crime so committed, Davis was charged with aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder in the death of Judge Harold Haley. And by the way, this is the same law where the guy that wrote that book, Chaos, that I forget his name, Tom something, he makes the argument that, in fact, Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor of Manson, could, in fact, have been also charged with those murders because of his behavior. Isn't that interesting? Based on California law, Davis was charged with aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder in the death of Judge Harold Haley, and Marin County Superior Court Judge Peter Allen Smith issued a warrant for her arrest. Hours after the judge issued the warrant on August 14, 1970, a massive attempt to find and arrest Davis began. On August 18th, 4 days after the warrant was issued, the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover listed Davis on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive list. She was the third woman and the 309th person to be listed. Soon after, Davis became a fugitive and fled California. According to her autobiography, during this time she hid in friends' homes and moved at night. On October the 13th, 1970, FBI agents found her at a Howard Johnson Motor Lodge in New York City. President Richard M. Nixon congratulated the FBI on its capture of the dangerous terrorist Angela Davis. On January the 5th, 1971, Davis appeared at Marin County Superior Court, declared her innocence before the court and nation. I now declare publicly before the court, before the people of this country, that I am innocent of all charges which have been leveled against me by the state of California. John Abt, ABT, General Counsel of the Communist Party USA, was one of the first attorneys to represent Davis for her alleged involvement in the shootings. While being held in the Women's Detention Center, Davis was initially segregated from other prisoners in solitary confinement. With the help of her legal team, she obtained a federal court order to get out of the segregated area. Across the nation, thousands began organizing a movement to gain her release. In New York City, black writers formed a committee called the Black People in Defense of Angela Davis. By 1971, more than 200 local committees in the United States and 67 in foreign countries worked to free Davis from jail. John Lennon and Yoko Ono contributed to this campaign with the song Angela. In 1972, after a 16-month incarceration, the state allowed her release on bail from the county jail. On February 23rd, or 223, 1972, lest we forget your 322, Roger McAfee, a dairy farmer from Fresno, California, paid her $100,000 bail, equivalent to $552,000 in 2023, another 322, bail with the help of Steve Sparacino, a wealthy business owner. The United Presbyterian Church paid some of her legal defense expenses. A defense motion for a change of venue was granted, and the trial was moved to Santa Clara County on June the 4th, 1972. After 13 hours of deliberations, the all-white jury returned a verdict of not guilty. After the verdict, one juror, Ralph DeLange, made the Black Power salute to a crowd of spectators, which he later told reporters was to show a unity of opinion for all oppressed people. 10 jurors later attended victory celebrations with the defense. The fact that she owned the guns used in the crime was judged insufficient to establish her role in the plot, because they would have to prove intent, lest we forget. She was represented by presumably, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. She was represented by Howard Moore Jr. and Leo Branton Jr., who hired psychologists to help the defense determine who in the jury pool might favor their arguments, a technique that has since become more common. They also hired experts to discredit the reliability of eyewitness accounts. And today's so-called right-wing MAGA, all of this have absolutely no concept of this, and maybe they're about to get steamrollered by this motherfucking movie and are just a repeat, and just let's run the same script of the 60s and 70s. Let's just do it to them again. Why not? They're too dumb to see it coming. They bailed the banks out in 2008 and 2009. Even though we asked their permission, so let's just go ahead and bail them out again in 2022 or 2023, and they barely even noticed. What's up, El Perro? The people barely even noticed that a second bailout happened. Why would they? So tell me again how the people are going to rise up and throw off the chains of the oppressive government and defeat the so-called lefty Democrats. Tell me again how that's going to happen. Pretty please with sugar on top. Now, Benton, of course, is falling again into improperly identifying with the invalid realm, and I'm feeling it in my tissues. So you'll forgive me for not reading the rest of it, but it's all there on Wikipedia if anybody cares to read it. It's all there. Makes for an interesting and entertaining discussion that certainly will not amount to a hill of beans. And for my own self-protection, I'm going to need to do some yoga here, some stretching of my shoulder, which is experiencing quite a bit of pain. That's that good pain, though. No more bitter sweet, no more good pain.
And the guilt that hangs around your neck
has got me locked up in a cage. You've got to learn to live until no end now.
But first you must learn to swim all over again. Because lies on the riverside. We'll never say goodbye, no, no. Lies on the riverside. So put your feet in the water, put your head in the water, put your soul in the water, going before a swim tonight. I have forever always tried to stay clean and constantly baptized. Oh, I'm aware now that the river's banks they are dry, and to wait forever is to wait for life. I've got to learn to live until the end.
Fully accepting death, perhaps?
First I must learn to swim all over around here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We go life on the riverside. Yeah. And we'll never say goodbye, no, no. Life on the riverside. So put your feet in the water, put your head in the water. Come on, put your soul in the water. Join me for a swim tonight. For a swim tonight. I've got to learn to live until